I didn't stay up. Okay. Am I supposed to click something? I guess.
No, not at all. I've got it all here. We're
okay.
And we're on.
I didn't stay up. Okay. Am I supposed to click something? I guess.
What is
No, not at all. I've got it all
Where is
here. We're
feedback coming from?
Okay.
And we're on.
I didn't stay up.
There's an echo.
Okay. Am I supposed to click something? I guess.
I can't
no,
figure
not at all.
There's somebody has
Feedback.
their Facebook on.
And we're on.
I didn't stay up.
There's an echo.
Okay.
I can't figure
Not at all.
Okay, are we okay now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think we're okay. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, it is January the 7th. Well, the first question for Bill and Paul is what did either of you do to celebrate the anniversary of January 6th yesterday? Bill.
Paul's Canadian, so I don't know what he did, but I didn't do anything to celebrate. But I was there. I was in Washington, D.C. With millions of supporters.
I really did not realize that. What all happened? I mean, what was it like?
Well, it was just so crowded. There were no toilets anywhere around. And whenever you had a function, they would put toilets out for people. So the city police and the people who planned the park, they wanted to make it hard for people. So they didn't put any toilets out. There were people standing around all over the place. And you had to stand for hours. And I went with a couple of my kids, and they were so, they were able to stand, but I didn't like it. So I went over to the side, and underneath the tree, someone had parked one of those little scooters that you drive up there. And so I sat down underneath the tree on those scooters. And then some people came by and says, "Hey, look above you. You better be careful." I looked up, and the tree was just filled with people sitting on tree limbs watching everybody. And they said, "You better adjust where you're sitting if they fall out." So I moved over a little bit. But so I sat down and just watched the affairs, watched people walking by. There were Christian pastors walking by, handing out leaflets. Everybody had Trump signs, and it was really a good event. And we were all standing there listening to the speeches. And then at the end of Donald Trump's speech, he says, let's go to the Capitol. And so everybody, there was a million of us walked to the Capitol, and it was so tight you could hardly walk like this. So we walked over there, and we got there to near the front. And one of the girls I was with wanted to take me all the way to the front. So we went, and the three of us went in line. I held on behind this gal, and we walked all the way to the front. And there was a gate there, a stone wall. She said, "Let's climb over that." She said, "We want to go over." So people set aside, and they helped us climb over this 4-foot wall. And so we walked on. It was on a grassy area. There was about maybe 100 people there. And then in front of that, that's where they put partitions that were metal, but they were temporary. And then there were guards standing around there, keeping us from getting actually onto the Capitol itself. But then occasionally people would breach it and go up to the side and take pictures of themselves and come on down. And there were all sorts of yelling and screaming, but it was all just pro-Trump stuff, pro-America. Everyone was waving flags, It was a nice little rally right there. And then occasionally you would see there were some smoke bombs that would go off, boom. And then people go, I got smoke bombs. So people would head out and over on the side. And then all that's silly. These guys are fair weather fans. They can't stand a little smoke in their eyes. And then as it was going on, a pastor right around us, we're standing in this group of about 100 people just in front of the barricade that the police were at. They said, "We need to say a prayer." And I thought, "Oh, brother, we don't need to pray. We need to protest." And
right on.
And I'm a Christian, but we don't need to pray. But everybody around them, because I was standing in this group of Christians, they all got on their knees, started praying. And just then someone tried to breach the wall. So the police threw another tear gas right at us, right at me.
Oh.
They go boom. Everybody's on their knees, kneeling with their head down, and me and my kids are standing there, and we just get pummeled with tear gas. And it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I thought, this is terrible. So I immediately turned around and head back. They had to take me back because I'm just an old guy. And they took me back and I sat down there and I was just the fair weatherest soldier of any fair weather person. I sat down there and wiped my eyes for like an hour, even though it only hurt for 15 minutes. And they went back up there and joined all of the groups and everything. But it was a peaceful rally. The only thing that was not peaceful were the police killing Ashley Babbitt and the rest of us. But you know, they marched. I saw the YouTubes, and you guys all did, where they marched through the Capitol, holding American flags, and then the congressmen, they were just all freaked out because it was an insurrection. I do want to say that it was not an insurrection. I want to say that it was not that what Ted Cruz said. I hope it tanks his career for running for office. Of course, the fact that he's Hispanic should tank his career for running for office in America anyway. But but the point is, there is legitimacy in what the extreme left and the establishment is saying when they call it an insurrection, because in the hearts of many people, we want to change the country so dramatically that it's not that far off base to say that it is the seeds of an uprising. And that's why they're so afraid, because next time it could really happen. This was unorganized. It was led by the president, who wanted us to come in and peacefully show our support for him. It was not someone saying storm the Bastille like took place in France. But the next time, if we get a leader on there is in the hearts of many people the desire to have an insurrection.
Well, you asked me what I was doing. I watched CNN and I was so upset and traumatized, and that American democracy is falling apart. I had to go and find a safe space and just somebody to hug me. I mean, I don't know. If drinking don't kill me, that memory will. No, but seriously speaking, though, I really appreciate what Bill is saying. This was no insurrection. Come on, those of us who read a bit of historical literature. If you want to overthrow a government, first of all, you go in there with troops, not largely unarmed people who I think were frankly amazed they got inside. This is no insurrection. This is a protest. And if it being Black Lives Matter storming a government building and occupying it, or as the Antifa did for weeks in Portland, and the Native Indians have done in Canada, no problemo. But I think you're onto something. No, this was not an insurrection, but many people are angry with the existing order, which has betrayed them and betrayed them and betrayed them, and they want fundamental change, and that scares the bejesus out of the left lib cultural Marxist establishment, just like Charlottesville did. Charlottesville was a peaceful protest, which horrible policing and Antifa managed to cause violence. But to the sight of these hundreds and hundreds of mostly young men and women, if I might say, middle class. These weren't hillbilly rejects or biker, the usual stereotype. This scared the establishment, and of course January 6th far more so. This mass protest in Washington, some of which ended up on Capitol Hill, and that's why there's been this brutal reaction. 700 people arrested, ferocious sentences handed out for what in many cases is essentially just trespassing, and then of course the murder, and that's what it was, of Ashley Babbitt. When on a practical basis, on my radio show and on Twitter and elsewhere, I've been urging people to remember that she was a martyr. She was gunned down. She was unarmed, gunned down in cold blood by this Negro cop who ended up getting away with it.
Yeah, that's right. And if the race has been reversed, that cop, rightly so, would be pilloried. But because it was black killing a white person, they don't care.
Oh, and it's that the heartlessness of the political elite of both colors. As we've mentioned on previous programs, it's largely been people who look like us who have betrayed us. It's not primarily some of the loudmouth black congressmen, the one who's always going on. I think he's on that special committee looking into January 6th. So that will be a complete kangaroo court.
Yeah.
You can almost write the findings already.
Speaking of kangaroo courts, I don't know if you all heard, but the Michaels, father and Travis and Gregory Michael, were both sentenced to life today.
Sentenced to life without parole?
No, but Brian, the third person, was offered possibility of parole after 30 years. The guy who did the filming, basically. But no parole for the others because they showed no remorse.
That is just ferocious, and they're in a real bind. How can you show remorse if you don't believe you're guilty? If you're saying that you drive drunk and you kill somebody, okay, I can see pleading guilty and showing remorse. I made a big mistake. I hate what I've done, but they don't believe they did anything wrong. And why should you put on weep crocodile tears for something you don't believe you did wrong, that in your heart you're not sorry for?
Well, especially when the maximum benefit you can get from it is the possibility of parole after 30 years. I mean, dad probably will not make it that long. The son might, but this is mind-boggling. It's kind of open season on white people in the American courts.
Yeah.
Well, what I remember, quite recently, one of the leaders of a foreign country, in fact, maybe more than one, and maybe it was Russia, said that America, you have a lot of political prisoners. And that's true. We have a lot of political prisoners now that we've never had before. People who've committed nothing or minor crimes, and they're in jail for long periods of time. And I remember when Ceausescu the people finally rose up and destroyed the communist leader and his wife of Romania. And people were so oppressed for so long that they finally rose up and did the leaders in. And there have been a lot of uprisings against communism since we were alive, and maybe a little bit just before we were born, but we haven't seen anything to attack a monolithic organization other than communism. And I think that if there is an uprising, there will be an attack of the establishment, and it won't be an uprising against the Democrats or the Republicans. It'll be against both of them, and it'll be against the establishment. And you may end up seeing similar things that has happened in communist countries when the oppression got so great.
One of my friends was there in Romania when the two Ceausescus were executed. Ceausescu was a partly sinister figure and partly almost a comic figure. He gave himself all sorts of honors and titles, and one of them was the genius of the Carpathians.
So he and the guy from North Korea had a lot in common, I guess. Yeah.
No, the guy from North Korea has the more unusual hat.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, Bill, I had no idea you were there last year. I mean, that's a fascinating story, and I mean, what I remember is talking to people. I had been working on that amicus brief in support of the original action by the state of Texas, and we were very frustrated at that point, Nathan McPherson's team and I, and we were wondering if Trump wasn't going to actually use this phrase insurrection to invoke what's called the Insurrection Act. Did anybody in Washington ever mention that while you were there? No,
No, I don't know. I don't know that.
See-
But I do want to make the point that the area that we were in, and I'm not sure which side of the Capitol had the most violence going on, but there were people. It was just a peaceful little cute protest, and the only danger we saw came from the establishment people in charge firing tear gas at us.
were you on the mall side or were you on the outside?
We walked from
The White
the
House?
yeah, we walked along the mall. We walked along the mall just straight ahead. We didn't go around. So I guess we'd say we're on the mall side.
Okay.
That's a very interesting observation about the subtle harassment, not only the tear gas, but the lack of toilets. We've seen the same thing in Canada at large in the lockdown rallies. The smaller ones, not so much, but when they know there's going to be thousands of people, public toilets disappear. And of course, if it's during a lockdown, there's hardly any business establishment open where you could go to the washroom. This is just establishment nastiness to people legitimately exercising their right to speak, their right to protest. It's the sort of harassment you'd expect in a banana republic. And we've got a cold banana up here and a warmer banana down in DC.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyhow, let's talk about, you were talking about the rebellion, uprising against the establishment. Well, last night or early this morning, a figure of the establishment passed away. He passed away in the Bahamas, but his name was Sidney Poitier. And one of the goals, and I think we all agree on this, one of the goals of the establishment is the abolition of the white race.
Yes.
And Sidney Poitier was a symbol of that basically my entire life. I mean, since I was 7 years old. And I mean, that movie that he did in 1967 had a huge impact on people. But once I went to law school and started studying it, I realized, wow, that came out exactly 6 months after interracial marriage was declared to be a substantive right under the Constitution. And no state could prohibit interracial marriage as a matter of substantive due process. And that changed the character of the entire world in so many ways.
Okay, let me make my first comment. I don't believe that historically the establishment had desired to eliminate the white race. And I don't think majority of the establishment, even today, wants to eliminate the white race. I believe it is a byproduct of misdirected attitude. I think that it started out with a good intention, and it says, like, what is it? The road to hell is paved in good intentions. They wanted to provide equality for everybody. They thought it was not going to change the racial makeup of America. We let a few people interracially marry. They're going to allow them to exercise their rights. And I don't think, I think that their desire was not to destroy the white race at that time. Today, I believe that there are a lot of people that are in key positions that chortle when they see the white race decline. But I don't believe historically it had been a plan to destroy the white race like that half Japanese guy did in Europe, whatever he's called, some sort of Caligari plan or whatever it's called. Yeah. However, the situation we have now, the result is just the same. The white race has its back against the wall, and it's going to have to do something to change this. And I do believe that there are a lot of malicious people nowadays who want to see the white race die, but there's still a lot of people in the establishment who deny the facts, and they are more afraid of being called a racist than they are afraid of their race dying out.
No,
I agree and disagree. I think there are many people who probably had wrong-headed but idealistic intentions about equality and things were not going to change much. Just people would be equal and would not be socially ostracized, etc. But in the background were people in Europe like Kalergi, and he had all sorts of followers here, and the Frankfurt School too, which and its followers, who have significantly penetrated academia and much of the communications establishment, and are creating the ideas, even that we don't really exist. Well, we exist when we have white privilege, but we don't really exist because race is a social construct. Always gives me a laugh because Native Indians and Blacks know exactly where to go and collect goodies based on race. They're not confused as to what they are. It's not a social construct. But I agree. Not everybody who has pushed this agenda means badly. I think there are many had a sense of fairness or were idealistic, but in the background, there is this deep hatred for our race.
Well, Bill, I'm a little bit surprised to hear you saying that you don't think it was on purpose, because what was the 60s? The 60s was school integration, the Civil Rights Act, the 1965 immigration bill, and what do those things have in common? I remain to this day at a total loss, as do many Black people that I talk to, about how school integration was ever supposed to improve the lot of Black kids in school. I mean, sitting next to a white person is stressful if you're not used to it. Sitting next to a Black person is stressful if you're not used to it. And so what was the point of school integration? What was the point of changing the immigration laws, if not to make America less white? I mean, the real purpose of the integration laws, I mean, here in Louisiana, for instance, the history of integration laws is very clear. Of segregation laws was very clear. They instituted segregation laws primarily to prevent miscegenation. The goal, the primary goal, was to keep the races separate because, face it, young people, they get close to each other and they want to get closer. It's what I think it was in the movie Annie that Annie Get Your Gun, or the musical that had this song, Doing What Comes Naturally. And the only way to keep people from doing what comes naturally is to keep them apart. It just seems like from 62 to 67, when Loving v. Virginia was handed down, and then this movie with Sidney Poitier comes out exactly 6 months later. June 12th was the Supreme Court ruling. December 12th was the release date of the movie. It seems very coordinated to me.
Kevin McDonald, in his just mind-blowing book, A Culture of Critique, points out that the changes in the immigration law from essentially a balanced immigration law, the U.S. immigration law of 1924, I believe, was designed to meet the economic needs, if necessary, of the United States, but also not to upset the racial balance. We had similar legislation in Canada, and there was the White Australia Act in Australia. Within a year, not of the change in your law, in 65, ours changed, Australia changed, I think, 1 year later. Behind that, as Kevin McDonald points out, there was extensive lobbying for years by Jewish groups. And their goal was to create a multicultural society where they would stand out less. And that's the nicest interpretation.
That is the interpretation that I have, and I think that's true. And I think that maybe Emanuel Seller was kind of moving his hands when he passed the bill, thinking that exact same thing, that this is going to create a larger pool of non-white people and I can blend in more. But I think Teddy Kennedy thought, oh, this is just a great deal. It's not going to change the racial makeup of America and it's going to help everybody out. So I think that the white people were naive and the Jewish people were crafty. I think that's.
In the case of Teddy Kennedy, he was a very junior senator back then. I think he was a junior senator for New York and then moved back to home in Massachusetts. But he was asked that question, and I don't know by whom, by one of these Southern senators. Will this change the makeup of America, and won't this make it difficult for white labor? And he poo-pooed it. Oh, no. There won't be any changes, would be very minor and short-lived. Well, okay, maybe he was naive, but interestingly, till he finally died of brain cancer, like 40 years later, he was a strong advocate for the sort of immigration that is changing America. He could no longer be naive and say, well, there won't be a change. There was massive changes, and he was still fanatically in favor of amnesty. So I consider him a hypocrite and a villain. I mean,
right, but I think what it is at first he was naive, and then he was so afraid of being called a racist that he wouldn't change his views. And so that's the problem that I uncovered. Now, I remember one of the first political statements that I become aware of, and I couldn't really comprehend it. It was impeach Earl Warren.
Yes.
And it was impeach Earl Warren because I think of all of these changes, incremental changes that were taking away the rights of white Americans, and particularly this Loving v. Virginia decision that his court decided to allow interracial marriage. And a lot of people were saying, we got to impeach Earl Warren. I remember that was one of the first phrases that I remember. I remember asking my dad, what the heck, what does impeachment mean? What's Earl Warren mean? What's this all about? And to this day, I regret the fact that we didn't impeach him, but whatever.
When I became a John Bircher, even though I'm a Canadian, back in those days, yes, I remember impeach Earl Warren was a big thing. You sound like a 60s character. What's it all about, Alfie?
Well, I started school in the 50s. In kindergarten in 1959, I was in kindergarten. And in the first few years, we said prayers and we prayed to Jesus Christ every morning in school. And in my school, basically all the way through high school, we only had a handful of non-white people in any class or even in the school where I grew up. And now you can't find a white classroom anywhere. So
I went to a private school in West Toronto, and of 650 boys, I think there were 3 non-whites.
Yeah.
2 of them Japanese.
Yeah.
They hardly even count as non-white, but amazing.
Canada was a much whiter country back then.
Yeah, and so I think
the United States.
I think now that we have to have a great awakening, like they say, we have to have a desire to change the system, and we have to not be afraid of being called a racist.
Yeah.
And when the conservatives, the Republicans, they say, "Oh, he's a racist," and when they call the left, "Oh, the Antifa, they're racist," or all people, they're racist. We got to realize, no, they're not racist. We are. We got. I was country before country was cool.
Right.
We got to say I was proud of my race before it was cool.
Now that's very good. You're mentioning the Negro who died in the Bahamas, although I believe he was an American citizen, right? Sidney Poitier.
He was born in the Bahamas, actually.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I don't remember the movie you're referencing, but I think a couple of years after that, there was a movie set in the slums of some English city called To Sir with Love. And that made a big impact on me because I found it bizarre. Here's Sidney Poitier. He's put into this slum school. I think it's an all-girls class, all nice white girls, and some of them are. I mean, they're very rebellious, and some of them are really, quite frankly, slutty. And one of the stars there, one of the particularly sluttiest, in the movie is a star from that era, Judy Geeson. Okay, but he turns out to be very calm and wise, and eventually he gets them all on side, and the movie fades out with that song "To Sir with Love," who taught us all we know, blah 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 blah. So it's part of the propaganda of race mixing. But beyond that, the wise white guy and the stupid, the wise black guy and the stupid white person, which is now absolutely de rigueur in most advertising in North America. The white male is hardly ever there in any positive role unless it's to explain how this pharmaceutical will help his swollen prostate or something.
Yeah. If you remember, like the radio shows from the 1930s and 40s, you had George Burns and his wife, Gracie Allen.
Yeah.
And she was always the dumb blonde, the dumb chick, and he was always the smart guy. And you listen to those things, and the roles have completely changed now. But the one thing that we need to be aware of is that the roles changed, like you say, in the 60s, and this is 2022.
Yeah.
And so we have gone decades and decades where there has been anti-white male propaganda. And we're starting to wake up, and there's hope. We may wake up before we be genocided out, but there's a start. There's a sliver of hope.
I think one area we should really focus on as activists and commentators is the absolutely poisonous role of advertising. On my favorite garbage truck, CNN. I was watching it the other day. They had an ad on for eHarmony, which is a dating service. And okay, the two people who found happiness through eHarmony, one weedy-looking white guy and some nervous-looking black guy, and they're now a couple, and they even kiss there in the eHarmony brought them together.
And eHarmony started out as a Christian site, I believe.
Did it? Oh my God.
I think so. Maybe eHarmony will say that I'm sue me for what's it called? Sue me for defamation for calling them Christian. But I think that's how it started. Yeah, I know what you mean, and that's why, and I mentioned this before, is that there have been in communist countries, there have been re-education camps.
Yes.
And those generally have had a very bad reputation because a lot of people didn't come out of them alive. But I think we maybe need to have re-education camps and only do it artfully, do it where we can actually re-educate people and have them come out with good attitudes. And maybe you need to take all these advertising executives and all these advertising copywriters and maybe make them the first people to re-educate them, see if it works.
Well, Bill, there's a kinder and gentler way to do that, and you're in Los Angeles. And so I wanted to kind of put you on the spot and say, have you ever thought about trying to promote the production of pro-white media, movies, television shows, revive some of the spirit of the 50s? Because Guess Who's Coming to Dinner really, in my mind, studying the 60s, was a major turning point. And, I don't know the movie Paul's talking about, but in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, one of the most unrealistic things about it was that this major episode of miscegenation was taking place in extremely, maybe it is realistic, I'm not sure, an extremely upper class elite setting. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. This was their last movie together. They were a great, back in the glory days of Hollywood. They were a great pair. And the part that Sidney Poitier plays is of a young black doctor. I mean, there were so many of those in the 1960s. He met their daughter on vacation in Hawaii. And of course, this is the 60s. I think 67 was in some quarters called the Summer of Love, but they they got together in a whirlwind romance in Hawaii and decided to get married. And basically, Katharine Hepburn's part is much more accepting of the innovation than Spencer Tracy, the father's part. And it's just kind of surreal because it makes it seem like this is the enlightened, educated, progressive way to live. It's just all these sort of what some advertisers call per words, all these beautiful concepts. And is there a way that we can get some white counterculture? I mean, I don't know what else to call it, because we are. I don't know if you read the comments on it. Our Christmas show went up above 600 views, and the most vocal commentators are, of course, the negative ones, and they're just horrified that Facebook hasn't shut us down, and neither is YouTube. Knock on wood, not this week. But how do we retake the medium? Because television and movies and advertising are the re-education camp. Though that's the 24/7 re-education camp, basically probably since the 1930s, maybe since the 20s. How do we take charge of that again?
Yeah, well, a lot of people have asked me over the years how we can do it, and I've got some irons in the fire in that regard right now. But it is kind of hard because even if we produced it, we'd have a hard time getting it out there because they would not let they would shut us down. Now I've worked on projects to try to do this. I mean, when Ernst Zundel and his wife Ingrid Ringland were trying to do a movie regarding Arminius, the ancient Greek guy who kept
German
guy that kept the French from, I mean the Roman from coming in. We tried to do that. We couldn't get funding for that. And then when Merlin Miller tried to do his movie on the Liberty, the strafing of the Liberty boat or whatever, we couldn't get funding for that. So funding is a problem, but but now with technologies, you can put together great movies with a handheld iPhone, and record it like that. But then marketing and putting it out there for the public is hard. So things might happen, but it's slow in coming, and I do have some irons in the fire. But you talk about LA. I mean, LA is such a wealthy market with so many wealthy people that we just can't compete. I mean, I was just looking today. There's a home in Los Angeles for sale for let's see, $295 million. And so this guy, somebody's going to buy a home in LA and put up $295 million for a place to spend the night. And so that's what we're competing against here in LA. When we come up, I look at my change purse, see how many coins I have to put towards this project, and it's not anywhere near $295 million. So we got a struggle ahead of us.
No, I think Bill. Charles' idea is correct, and it's been floating around for 20 years. Definitely, we have to do these types of things, and I think the venue may well be, through the internet. There's so many now movies available now. A friend of mine, a fellow that was born in the Sudetenland, has done an amazing 17-part series, each of them an hour, about the history of the Sudetenland, going back, to prehistory. Some of the really engaging ones have to do with during the Second and World War and right after. But this is done basically with techniques that you can master on a good home computer. Now, it's not; these are not productions with actors or big name people, but a lot of people are thinking along these lines, and I've been trying to help them promote these. The big problem is they're produced, but they sit there. How do you get them out to people? And I think that's a problem we're going to have to solve. It almost didn't happen with Mel Gibson and his Passion of the Christ. He produced it. It was a well done movie. He's a pro. He got other competent people to work with him. It was a engaging film, but the blockage, of course, occurred when the bad guys didn't want to distribute it, and it was only with great difficulty that it even got out there.
And one thing that we need to draw distinction between Mel Gibson's work and the Sudan guy's work is those were high quality productions. Most of the stuff we see in our movement is more slapdash. So the work has to be well written, well produced, well acted. Everything has to be done as professionally as if we're part of the establishment. And I haven't yet to see that coming.
That was what impressed me about Merlin Miller, because I had a number of discussions with him about Arminius. And he said, first of all, the first lesson is you have to entertain. If this is just a 2-hour propaganda thing, it won't fly. The reason our enemies are so successful with their mainstream entertainment propaganda is that they are entertaining, even though they might be pretty low level. They entertain, or they make you laugh, and that's the first thing. And then you work your message into that. But it's got to be a good rattling adventure story, and that's, the Arminius story was, first rate. He's a fantastic character. There'd be all sorts of blood and guts and tactics and near misses and final triumph and all of that. All the good entertainment stuff. But
it would
I thought
also,
Miller was a real professional. I appreciated the man.
yeah, it would also include treason and treachery by his brother, who turned him in and got him killed. And that's what we're seeing today. Our people are treasonous and treacherous. So it would be a good analogous story to our current day situation.
Has
So,
that movie actually been produced? Because I don't know it.
no, we couldn't get the money for it. So if of your 875 listeners this week, if any of them want to pony up only half of the price of this home that's going for in LA, we'll put it together and we'll do this movie. So that would be 150 million. Anybody got 150 million dollars? We'll put it on.
Supposedly, Cruella last summer was produced during COVID for something like 22 million. So you don't have to have that many to have a good hit. You just gotta have some really good directors. And I don't know. Here New Orleans is rapidly becoming what they call the Third Coast, center of the Third Coast, and there are a lot of movies being produced here. But again, all the money is for Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Black. And occasionally something to do with, Jews. Blacks and Jews are it. And people like us are just, who wants to make a movie about white people?
Yeah. Well, I've got, I can't go into the details, but I've got a 2-year project that will come to fruition this year, and it will be a start of what you're talking about, and it'll change the course of with the Western civilization, and it will be saved, and we'll rebuild it. And so you just kind of wait with bated breath for a few months, and it'll be out there. So don't worry.
That doesn't have anything to do with Branson, Missouri, does it?
I really don't want to talk about that.
Okay, fine. Sorry, it piqued a memory I had. Anyhow, it's amazing if we think about. Let's go back just to Sidney Poitier and Guess Who's Coming for Dinner. Just think how cheap that movie was. It basically all takes place in one house, a nice house, not a $234 million house. Nothing close to that. Where is that house, by the way?
It's right next door to mine. And if I got it, I'll use it for a guest house. But no, I think it's in Brentwood, next to Beverly Hills. I think it's where Ronald Reagan lived and died.
Oh, Rancho del Cielo?
Well, in that same general area, when I saw where you look out and you see LA, and from the angle that you look to see LA at, I think it's pretty much over the hills above Ronald Reagan.
Well, anyhow, I mean, it's all a matter of being creative, and I guess that the thing we all ought to do is, since we've all got smartphones, we ought to start making our low-level productions and doing with them whatever we can, and then competitively, people will try to improve and do better and better and better. And I think it's fascinating how, for the ever since Birth of a Nation, racial politics has been framed through the movies. And the interesting thing is, it started off on our side, and then on the centennial of Birth of a Nation, they made they had this spate of kind of pro-Black films that were just awful, including a parody of Birth of a Nation.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't race, what was it called, A Birth of the Nation, didn't that spur about 20 million men to join the Ku Klux Klan? I heard that it just was a huge growth.
It recreated the Klan. The Klan had gone out of existence at the end of Reconstruction, and in 1915, after the release of Birth of a Nation, it recreated the Klan. And established. I mean, this is the thing. Movies are the new mythology. They are the new stories that inspire people and that people discuss over dinner, and that frame the way people think. And Birth of a Nation created the stage for the 20s in so many ways. As you said, the KKK, I don't know, about 20 million people. I've heard that the KKK had as many as 6 million people in the 19...
Well, not that figure, not that figure. Make it 75.
Okay, 8 million. 8
All
million.
right. I'll go with that. But you're right. The Klan was just about moribund. And by the mid-20s, you can see pictures of this or newsreels. They had 100,000 people, Klansmen and Klanswomen, marching up Pennsylvania Avenue. It was impressive,
including Donald Trump's dad.
Oh,
yeah, Donald Trump's father was arrested at a Klan rally, and so. Donald Trump's father, when he was a young kid, was arrested at a Klan rally in Washington, D.C. And, I can't remember what excuse they made on that. Maybe he says, he was trying to sell hot dogs or something. I don't know, but you look it up.
I never heard this way. That's wild.
And
but
that movie was so mainstream that President Woodrow Wilson had a private screening for it at the White House. But you get on about the importance of movies. I'm afraid, unfortunately, for many people who never cracked a serious history book, what they see in movies is history.
Is history, yes.
Yeah. So it must be like this. Well, given that is the nature of a lot of people, we should be having our message out there. And I know that's easy to say we should. There's a big gap between we should and actually making it happen. But we have to be thinking along those lines.
I mean, there are just so many opportunities. It's really fascinating. I mean, I have a background in archaeology, and so unsurprisingly, I spend a lot of time explaining the difference between my life and Indiana Jones' life. And there are a few differences, I admit. Also, I frequent, because of my politics, I frequently get the question, well, the Nazis were interested in archaeology, weren't they? And, it's really interesting. If you look at the Indiana Jones movies, they actually focus attention on the Ahnenerbe. They don't use that word, but they're talking about the German interest in the ancestors and the ancestral cultures of the world.
What was the word you used?
Ahnenerbe. How does that translate? The ancestors, the ancestral wisdom.
What language is that?
German.
Oh, okay. So are we supposed to start calling you Louisiana Lincoln from here on out?
I'll think about that. Okay, it doesn't roll off the tongue very easily, does it?
Louisiana Lincoln, yeah, it does.
Promise me that you didn't single-handedly take down the Third Reich.
That's right.
I would have gotten Hitler's autograph if I had been in that line, just the way Indiana did. But anyhow, my point is that even really wacky movies like that offer the opportunity to reframe history, and they have reframed history. And you know, the Indiana Jones movies, three of them had to do with Nazis, and one of them had to do with communism during the Cold War. And there is just so much that has escaped us, and that has escaped our movement because we are not being creative enough.
Yeah, but one thing we have to realize is that the establishment has misrepresented history from as long as I can remember and before. I mean, the Civil War, massive misrepresentation on the purposes behind that. The World War II issues. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we would watch Combat, where you had Vic Morrow, a New York Jew, was portraying an American who would be fighting the Germans. And I asked my dad when I was just a kid, why are the Germans always the bad guys? And he says, well, it's because World War II was such an important thing in our mind, you know. And so, and then I think I read somewhere on the internet that the history books did not even list the Holocaust, of course, as a wiping out of the Jewish people until like the 1960s or 70s, and when Churchill wrote his book, a historical book on World War II, and he was a historian, he didn't mention anything about it.
Correct.
So there is
General de Gaulle.
Yeah, and so it's misrepresentation and hiding and distorting history that's taken place since at least the Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I kind of said about movies are modern source of mythology. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Greece and Egypt, and what the archaeology of Greece and Egypt is in large part about is the portrayal of their mythology, which was the source of their government. And the interesting thing, of course, about the modern era is that World War II has taken the place of the Trojan War. The Trojan War was the fundamental myth of Greek society. The Civil War became, and up to a point still is, the fundamental myth of American society. And I mean, for many years, my name is Charles Edward. And the martyrdom of King Charles Edward Stuart is coming up here on the 31st of January, and that was the mythology of constitutional government in England.
Okay, one point that you make that is important when you're talking about how in the ancient Romans used their architecture and their history as their culture and their mythology. One analogous that we have today is that Julius Caesar got his start and why he became famous and powerful. Do you know what his job was when he was a kid? When he was a young man? he was in charge of entertainment for the Roman Empire. He would go out and get all the Christians and all the gladiators, and he was in charge of putting on those big old affairs in that big massive arena. And so he was the entertainer of that day. And as a result,
that can't be quite true, because Julius Caesar died in 43 BC. There were no Christians at all in 43 BC.
okay, well, he gathered whatever he gathered the lions. He gathered the lions and the gladiators, and that's how he started his road to becoming the man that he is today.
I have never heard that. What this was something he inherited from his father, or how did he get such a position?
I don't know. You have to look it up. This is pulling back from my memory from like 30 years ago.
I think he was a consul, and they always had two consuls in Rome for a given time, and he may have taken that upon himself as a way to increase his popularity. The master of the games. But that was very clever propaganda, because he had a strong base when he eventually challenged or made his move for political power. He had a strong base among people, partly because of his being able to throw around a lot of money. And
yeah. So what we have today, I guess, the closest person to our ideology that's in the entertainment industry is either Mel Gibson or Kevin Sorbo. So maybe one of these two guys is going to become the new Julius Caesar.
Well, we've got to find somebody. I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever heard of anything about Julius Caesar like this. And nearest I can come is I'm thinking of Mark Antony's speech in Shakespeare, where he's sort of saying, Mark Antony, this is Shakespeare's interpretation, of course, seems to be saying that that Julius Caesar cared very much about the welfare and recreation of common people. He uses the word recreation as one of the unique features of Julius Caesar. I'm going to have to check on this, and
please do, and let me know whether it's either validated or discarded.
Well, we have you all wanted to keep this to an hour, and we're almost at an hour now. So if we reconvene and continue discussing this tomorrow night, I certainly will. And I mean, I just think that we've got to figure out a way to make our race sexy again, because that is really the fundamental problem of Hollywood. Hollywood has so skillfully, ever since at least Sidney Poitier, made Black men the sex objects of the modern world.
Well, I've got the personal resolution for that. I'm on a keto diet, so I'll be sexy again in about 4 months. Okay. On that note,
see you all tomorrow. Let's just confirm. 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Pacific. That work for everybody tomorrow?
Yes.
that works for me. Yes.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Let's make America white again.
That's
Okay.
right. Thank you.
And Canada too. And Canada too. Good night, everybody.